Hello guys, hope you guys had a great weekend, and today we are going to talk about clouds. Now we talked about clouds briefly when we were talking about the water cycle and how when water evaporates, it goes into our atmosphere, and when hundreds and thousands of droplets form and come together, they form clouds. Now, when the air is saturated, the water vapor changes to a liquid or solid state, depending on the air temperature. When the temperatures are above the water vapor freezing degree, the water vapor condenses on small particles in the air and forms tiny water droplets. But when it's below freezing, water vapor changes to a solid form, like an ice crystal maybe, and it becomes more solidified, not liquidy. Clouds can actually be classified into different types, and this normally happens by form. Now, if you can look here, different types of clouds look different. They have a different structure, and that's how we classify them. Now, the first picture that you guys see here is called a cumulus cloud. Now, cumulus cloud is the first of three types that we're going to look at. It normally looks like piles of cotton balls. Now, this is also something that have different shapes, and we might try to figure out what it looks closest to. Sometimes it might look like a cotton candy, or sometimes it might look like an elephant or a dog. We often talk about cumulus clouds. These are puffy and white and tend to have flat bottoms, and that's why they're known as cumulus. Now, these normally form when warm air rises, and they generally indicate fairly good weather. However, when these clouds get larger and larger, they also tend to produce thunderstorms. They come from a type of cumulus clouds, so we know that clouds are classified into three, but cumulus cloud is further classified into something known as cumulonimbus cloud. And the cumulonimbus cloud, is the one that typically leads to a thunderstorm. It's very big, and clouds that have names that include nimbus or nimbo are most likely to produce precipitation, like rain or snow or sleet or hail. So yeah, nimbus or nimbo. Now moving on, let's focus at the second type of clouds here, which is known as a stratus cloud. Now, these are actually not as tall as cumulus clouds, but they definitely do cover a lot of area. Now, clouds called stratus clouds are normally clouds that form in layers. Stratus clouds cover very large areas of the sky and often even block out the sun. So you might often see them when there's a gentle lifting of a large body of air. So that's what causes it into the atmosphere. And nimbostratus clouds. So again, it's a subcategory of the stratus cloud is a nimbostratus cloud. They're generally dark stratus clouds and usually produce light to heavy rain or even continuous rain. So during rainy seasons, you might often see this type of clouds in the atmosphere, in the sky, and that's most probably a nimbostratus cloud. Fog is actually a type of stratus cloud that has formed near the ground. Can you even imagine it? A cloud near the ground? Well, yeah, that happens, and it's a type of stratus cloud, and it's called fog. And finally, we will move on to something called the cirrus clouds. These are actually made of ice crystals. Now, this means that water vapor probably reached an area where the temperature was below the freezing level and converted to ice crystals and formed a type of cloud known as the cirrus cloud. They are actually very thin and very feathery white clouds, but these are very high up in the sky at very high altitudes. They normally form when the wind is really strong, and if it gets thicker, cirrus cloud can actually indicate that there is going to be a huge change in weather. Now, let's look at this picture. Clouds are also often classified by the altitude at which they form, unlike the form that we looked at or the structure that we looked at. Now, this picture actually shows how altitude groups can be used to describe clouds by focusing on the altitudes at which they actually form in the middle latitudes. Now, the prefix cirro, right? The cirro, like when we look over here, the cirrus cloud or cirrocumulus cloud. The prefix cirro is actually used to describe clouds that form at very high altitudes. For example, a cumulus cloud that actually forms in the atmosphere is called a cirrocumulus cloud. The prefix alto, as we can see here, altocumulus or altostratus, means that these clouds probably formed at middle altitudes. And clouds that form at a lower altitudes don't exactly have a specific prefix to them, and they can just go by their actual names, which were given to them depending on their form. Now, let's look at these high clouds between 8,000 and 6,000 meters. Now, because of the cold temperatures at very high altitude, they, like I just said when we talked about cirrus clouds, they're made out of ice crystals. And that's what as you guys remember, cirro is used to describe higher clouds or the ones that are formed at high altitudes. Now let's look at middle clouds between 6,000 meters and 4,000 meters. Now, if you guys remember from just a second ago, alto is what we use to classify clouds that are formed in middle altitudes. Now, middle altitudes, the clouds in the middle altitude can actually be made up of both water droplets and ice crystals, depending on where they formed and if the temperature was below or above the freezing degree. And finally, let's look at the low clouds between 4,000 below 4,000 to maybe, let's say, the ground. Now, these are generally almost always made up of water droplets, not ice crystals, because the temperature near the surface is also warmer. And like we said, there's not exactly any type of prefix that we use to describe them. And that is all we learned about clouds. I hope you guys have a great day. I will see you guys later. Bye.